Hi everyone, in this video I'd like to talk about the effects that people with narcissistic personality disorder have on their children. So the effects are profound and far-reaching and can result in all kinds of fallout from that trauma of growing up with a narcissistic parent. So let's have a look. So what is the fear of the self actually, and what is the fear of abandonment? This fear of abandonment, we hear it a lot, don't we? But what does it actually mean for people in terms of behaviours that they'll do, thoughts that they'll have, and the feelings that they have about themselves? So the fear of the self. What is the fear of the self? One clue that we have a fear of ourselves is that we're a people pleaser. So while it's normal for some people to be friendly and want to do some things for other people, when we only do things for other people and we rarely do things for ourselves, this is when we're putting other people's needs before our own. So this can be because we value other people's needs more than our own, or it feels safer to be taking care of other people than paying attention to our own needs and wants, and this is because of behavioural conditioning in childhood. And if you'd like to look at my video on guilt, why do I feel so guilty? This is all about that behavioural conditioning in childhood, and then how we defend ourselves against getting in touch with our own wants and needs by feeling feelings like guilt, despair, hopelessness and panic. So in essence, what's happening is we're protecting ourselves from knowing what our wants and needs are, because underlying, there's a fear of abandonment, a really serious fear of abandonment that's quite terrifying for a child to go through. And then we carry this with us into adulthood when we have unprocessed trauma, or when we haven't faced those feelings in ourselves, or we don't want to face those feelings, or we think we don't have them. And this is because they're so well repressed and they're so defended against. We think, oh, I'm fine, I had a narcissistic parent, but I'm all right. I survived and, I'm okay. So then we can look at clues in behaviour, can't we? So we can think, oh, I'm a people pleaser. Oh, I don't know what I like particularly. Oh, I don't have any hobbies. You do very people pleasing behaviours. People might say about you, oh, he or she would do anything for anyone. So this can be a clue that people know that you're very much a people pleaser. So of course, this can be healthy and normal, but it can be slightly skewed to being too much in people that have had a narcissistic parent. So let's have a look. The fear of the self, which the child of the narcissist feels, is the fear of abandonment. As a child, they have been emotionally neglected, punished and abandoned when they have tried to assert their will and become their real independent self. As a child, this would have been terrifying. When their real self wishes to assert itself, this brings on the fear of abandonment. So this then becomes a defense in later life. So the real self wants to express itself, and then this is shut down by a part of ourselves that's terrified of abandonment. Because what happens with trauma or growing up in a dysfunctional childhood is that you're reacting in the now as if the old trauma was still happening. So it needs to be faced. So these fears that we've pushed into our subconscious need to be brought into our consciousness so that they can be healed. And we can do this through self-development work, developing our self-awareness, and maybe with therapy with someone who understands trauma or who understands narcissism and who's qualified and licensed or belongs to a professional body. It can also cause the child of the narcissist to feel helpless, and this can force them into a dysfunctional, clinging relationship. Hours can be spent in addictions and avoidance of reality by acting out. To act out means to carry out behaviours which are usually self-destructive, and they may involve drugs, alcohol, running away, or confrontations with the authorities, such as the police. The acting out serves the purpose of dissipating the subconscious, uncomfortable feelings in a way that does not involve having to directly acknowledge them or face them, as they are too painful. So feelings are suppressed for a reason, and this is because they're really painful. So what we might do is dissipate. So we're getting rid of those feelings in a way that we don't have to actually look at what the source of those feelings are. So if we are triggered by figures of authority, for example, because we had this authoritarian, critical, narcissistic parent, then we might be irritated by figures of authority. So teachers, police, politicians, those kind of people, we might direct or project our anger onto those people, or our rage onto those people, because it's safer than looking at our pain. So we can be in a defense, we're in the anger, we're projecting onto something else, and we're avoiding the actual hurtness underneath the reaction that we're having. The suppressed painful feelings from childhood will tend to remain buried until the individual is in a safe enough place in life to be able to deal with them. A child of a narcissist will avoid triggering the fear of abandonment and depression by avoiding asserting themselves and not expressing their wants and needs. They may not be aware of who they are, or they may have feelings of, what's the point? No one listens to me anyway. So lots of people feel unheard or unseen when they've had a narcissistic parent, because they were, basically. So this becomes a core belief, and then this goes on into their adult life. And yeah, there's a feeling of no one's going to listen to me. What I say is not going to make any difference to anyone. So it can often result in keeping quiet. And then at other times, because we've suppressed these feelings, they can maybe explode out of us in an emotional outburst that might take us by surprise. And we think, oh, where did that come from? There's lots of different responses here. Everyone's different, and we all have different coping mechanisms and a different set of defences when we've come from a dysfunctional background. So it's seeing the information and then seeing what fits with us. And then also we can only see what we're ready to see. So sometimes we might hear some information and we think, what a load of rubbish, that doesn't apply to me. But then 6 months later we might think, oh, actually, that does apply to me. So it's really interesting how our defences work. And they're self-protective, aren't they? So we don't want to be overwhelmed with what happened to us. We don't want to feel it all at once. So we're processing things, and then sometimes traumatic memories are triggered, trauma responses are triggered, but then other times we feel safe enough to have a memory that's been suppressed, or we feel safe enough to realise our parents are narcissists, for example. Lots of people don't realise that for years. We might feel safe enough to realise our partner is a narcissist when we haven't been able to see that for a long time. So we see these things when we're ready in certain cases. So the suppressing of our wants and needs means our unique personality that can reach its full potential is suppressed and not activated. It's not realised. The rejection of their real self by the narcissistic parent is intolerable and painful. And of course, as well, when we're very young, that being emotionally neglected and maybe even physically neglected at times when we need to eat or drink can mean that there's going to be a fear of death there, that instinctual need to survive. And this can also be at the root of the fear. The price that has to be paid for feeling safe is their submission to the narcissist's will. So this is making a deal with the devil in childhood, isn't it? When we don't have any other options. So you have this overbearing, critical, punishing, narcissistic parent, and you're trying to survive in that environment as best as you can. And that's the price that we pay, is that we suppress our real self and we suppress our own wants and needs, and we become an adapted version of ourselves. And we can even say, actually, with people that go on to develop narcissistic personality disorder, they're also suppressing their wants and needs, and they're just feeding this grandiose image that was approved of by the narcissistic parents. And I'm not making excuses for those people. We're born with inherent characteristics, and we can go one way or the other. We can become narcissistic ourselves, or we can become more codependent. So when we look back on our childhoods, we might think that the narcissistic parent had so much power over us and they shaped who we are. But actually, we did make our own decisions along the way of how we were going to go and how we were going to deal with it. And we did have some power, although it was limited, obviously. So the fear of abandonment. A fear of abandonment is a deep-seated fear of being left by people that you are close to. And this fear affects your thoughts and behaviours. It can be rooted in childhood from physical or emotional neglect, or from an event such as the loss of a parent through death or divorce. This trauma results in an individual developing a fear or expectation that it will happen again. Narcissists see their children as extensions of themselves or as objects to be used to meet their needs, which renders them incapable of taking care of the emotional needs of another person. This is severe emotional neglect and means that they stifle their children's real self and mould them into what they want them to be through the punishing behaviours of rejection, silent treatments and rages. They are highly critical and frequently shame and ridicule their children. Many narcissists will never tell their children that they love them or be physically affectionate. And many narcissists will never say sorry for anything as well, and they will always blame their children. And even the deal the golden child has, they know they need to go along with that narcissistic parent to keep their privileged position in the family and not be in the position of a scapegoat child or the invisible child who is the ignored child. It's a hellish place to be, isn't it, growing up in a narcissistic family, and that fear which we have in us subconsciously until it's resolved and processed because our bodies carry trauma. There's an interesting book by Bessel van der Kolk which is called The Body Keeps the Score, and he talks about brain scans that they've done on people with trauma where they've shown that their brain structure is different. They have a swollen amygdala, for example, which is the fire alarm of the brain, which is biased to danger. So that's the part of the brain which is looking around for danger all the time, and in traumatized people. So this is proof that trauma affects our brains and our physical development. And then also he talks about how trauma gets stuck in the body. And this is the root of our defense systems, isn't it? It's the trauma that's stuck in our bodies and the emotions related to that. So emotion is the language of the body. So that fear of abandonment sits in us. So some people can feel it more keenly. Some people are quite disconnected from it. And all they know is that they don't want to be in a relationship with anyone, or they cling to a partner who might be abusive because they can't bear to be abandoned, or they really hate being alone. That can be another symptom of that, another clue that there's an underlying fear of abandonment. There's an article on my website about abandonment as well, which is at childrenofnarcissists.org.uk if you'd like to go over there and have a look at that one. A fear of abandonment can result in being highly insecure, low in confidence, low in the ability to feel safe in the world. So some children of narcissists, they don't feel safe in the world and they don't feel safe in their own skin as well. So it's a really frightening place to be. They feel unable to trust others. They're low in self-esteem. They can be jealous and they can be clingy, or they can push others away. So this can be a disorganized attachment. So if you'd like to look at my video, which is called, what's it called? I think it's called The Roots of Complex PTSD, Attachment Styles and Narcissistic Parents. So that talks all about that push and pull of that disorganized attachment. So it doesn't feel safe to be close to a narcissistic parent, but also you need to attach to them for your survival. So it's that impossible situation that you're in, and how does that affect your psychological development, and how do you cope with that, is that it results in this disorganized attachment. And individuals may have an expectation of abandonment. So you're expecting people to cancel appointments they've got with you. You're expecting friends to dump you. You're expecting your boyfriend to leave you at any moment. You're expecting your boyfriend to run off with another woman. You feel insecure about your husband. You might be checking his phone to see what he's up to. And you might not be, but you might have an underlying suspicion of, I don't trust him, what's he up to? Or her, I don't trust my wife, what's she up to? What's my girlfriend up to? When you've had a narcissistic parent. So it can result in paranoid thinking and suspicious thinking, because you have been betrayed and you have been let down and you have been emotionally abandoned, if not physically abandoned, by a narcissistic parent. So it's rooted in reality, but then it becomes a bias. It becomes one of our cognitive biases. So one of the ways we think, we're biased towards that way of thinking, that we expect that to happen and that we expect everyone to be like that. We expect relationships to go wrong. We accept a relationship where we're treated badly. We feel we don't deserve to be loved, and we might wonder why our partners are with us. Or we might think, oh, because you're with me, that means, there's something inherently wrong with me. Our self-hating might think, and then we might think, why are you with me anyway? There must be something wrong with you. Yes, so this is a huge effect that a narcissistic parent can have on their children. So this fear of abandonment really shapes our biases and the way we look at the world and the way we function. So we can see how powerful the effects are of that rejecting, critical, narcissistic parent on our real selves when we're very young. This develops into a fear of the self, which is rooted in that fear of abandonment, which is our very survival, physically and psychologically. How do we survive? So we survive by adapting these behaviours and becoming something different and repressing that as much as possible. But the real self is something that does want to blossom and grow, like a seed that will grow into a beautiful flower when we can become our real selves. So what can we do about the fear of abandonment? So it's developing our self-awareness and questioning ourselves. So when we find ourselves checking our partner's phone, when we find ourselves feeling quite needy, when we find ourselves alone and we're thinking, I hate being by myself, when we find ourselves drinking every day because we feel uncomfortable in our own skin, if we feel that we're anxious all the time and we don't understand why, it's questioning those things about ourselves and trying to go deeper with the questioning. So it's not just me. Some people think, oh, I'm really irritable all the time. It's just me. That's what I'm like. So it's questioning deeper than that, because that in itself can be a defense. So we can think, oh, it's just me that I'm really irritable. But then it's thinking, okay, I am really irritable. Why am I always irritable? And then looking at what triggers there are for you. So what's happening in your life that makes you really irritable. It's developing self-awareness in general. Question everything and explore what's going on for you by thinking, why am I like this and why am I like that? It's like putting together a puzzle. Lots of it is in your subconscious. So we want to bring those puzzle pieces into your consciousness so we can complete the picture so you can understand yourself. And then when you understand yourself, this is when a lot of healing's taken place, and then we can start to develop self-compassion, can't we? Because we understand why we do the things that we do. We're not a mysterious force that we don't understand that's awful or, horrible, or whatever beliefs you have about yourself. Or I'm nice sometimes, but there's something wrong with me, or, the burden we carry when we've had a narcissistic parent. So I hope that video was useful. Take care. Bye.